Hi. Hello, thank you for coming. I'm Phoebe. I'm moderating this panel, which is Portrayal of Mental Health, correct?
Yeah,
I think this one and the next one, and I kept forgetting which one was the right one. So everybody's been getting lots of emails with the wrong information. I'm very organised. I know what I'm doing. This isn't my first ever panel moderation at all. Hi. Thank you for coming. I'm going to shut up now. These people, tell them about you.
Oh, goodness. Hi, I'm Nicole, Pacent. I was asked to run Anyone But Me. That may be where you guys know me from. I'm on this panel, I guess, for multiple reasons, but 3.5 years ago, my sister took her own life, and so I have a lot of experience with being the family member of somebody who is struggling with mental illness. My mom has also struggled, so have I, just not to the extent that my sister did. So when I saw that we were doing Portrayal of Mental Health, I thought that that was extremely important and some discussion that I wanted to be a part of. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Mandahla Rose. Probably All About E is where you'd know me most from. Mental health is important. I mean, it's important to everyone. I also lost my brother exactly 10 years ago, and my mum 23 years ago. So I want to bring about awareness for mental health for everyone so that you know that you're not alone.
Hey, I'm Rowan, Ellis. I make videos on YouTube, and mental health is one of the topics that I talk about. So I've talked about OCD a lot. I'm kind of really interested and passionate about the elements of mental health which are not spoken about so much, and the way in which we discuss the ones that are. So the sort of depression, anxiety, that get talked about a lot, but not necessarily in the right ways. And then the sort of psychosis-based, hallucination-based stuff, which is completely avoided, and how we sort of make sure that we're not just sort of talking generally for talking's sake, but actually doing it meaningfully.
Hi, I'm Antoinette. I also make videos, but I also, I guess, tweet and Instagram a lot. I also focus a lot on mental health with the work that I do, and especially from like a social and political perspective. Like, I want to make sure that, or at least contribute to a sort of environment where mental health is not only, like, we're not only free to talk about it, but we're in an environment that actively works to support people, and, you know, particularly from like a local perspective or whatever. And yeah, you might know me from the internet. If you don't, that's chill.
Yeah, I am not a famous person. I'm an actor and a theatre maker. Most of my stuff is not on the internet, so unless you come to the southwest and see small-scale touring theatre, you won't know me. But I have personal experience of mental health. I grew up with my mum having depression and postnatal depression and all of that, so it's something that's kind of very important to me. I kind of do a lot of activism within disability, and I think I was first speaking to Rowan and Antoinette about setting up kind of a disability panel, and we decided we wanted to kind of separate out the two because we think they both deserve a whole hour to kind of get into. So that's kind of why we're here. So I have prepared questions. So I want to think, has anybody got any good representation? Can you think of a character, an LGBT character, who has accurately represented a mental health illness on television or YouTube or anywhere? In a book.
I am a really big fan of Kieran Walker from In the Flesh, who is a little bisexual little boy, who has depression, but then also the sort of explorations of PTSD and stuff within him and his sister in a series that's about sort of post-zombie apocalypse, what that looks like, and it's very interesting, the portrayals of like before and after this like obviously traumatic event, like the fact that he still existed with those mental health conditions beforehand, and then what that looks like afterwards. It's a good time if you haven't watched it. Can recommend.
Right, I assume that people in here have watched Scam, yeah?
Nope.
What? Okay, Scam is a Norwegian TV show. It's got brilliant representation. There are 4 seasons, and in the 3rd season there is a men loving men couple called Isak and Evan has bipolar disorder. And the course of the season not only sees like Isak coming to terms with his sexuality, but it also sees how he grapples with the boy he loves having a mental health condition that he can't really change. There's also background context about how he's had, you know, family members with mental health issues in the past, and that sort of created like a boundary or an obstacle in their relationship. But by the end of the season, like, I'm not going to spoil it, basically. But, like, it's good gay content, guys. Really get on it, please. Actually, I don't know if you can watch it. There were links flying around Tumblr. But, like, if you can, I trust you guys to be resourceful. But, yeah, Isaac and Evan from Scam, recommend.
I just finished watching The Haunting of Hill House.
Bro,
and,
yes.
Oh, my God. A sister in that, she is queer, which is wonderful. Hot. She's hot. Right. And obviously with the loss of family members, there is a lot of mental health in that as well. So I really enjoyed that. And I'm sitting here racking my brain thinking, oh, who else? But the thing is, there's not a lot of representation out there. So let's change that.
Yeah, Nicole can't think of any. Can't think of any.
I was like, where am I?
Yeah.
I concur. I mean, I was thinking of a couple different portrayals of mental health that have really struck me, and none of them have been queer, unfortunately. I will say that in terms of the one thing that I saw, it just is worth mentioning. The one thing that I saw back in the day where I was like, this is the closest thing I've ever seen to what it feels like to be this close to a person with mental illness was Rachel's Wedding. Anne Hathaway. The one. What was it? Rachel Getting Married. Thank you. That one. Yeah. That if you guys have not seen that movie, I highly recommend it. She is not queer, but it just shows like. God, the poor character trying over and over and over again to be able to fit into the rest of the family, and she just sticks out like a sore thumb, and it's a difficult movie to watch, but it is the most accurate portrayal of, I think, mental health within a family unit that I've ever seen, so.
So the only one I can think of, and I'm not even sure if the character is queer, is All for One. People seen All for One? Some people. So in the second season I've completely forgotten her name. Anybody help me?
It's going great, guys.
Ellie goes through trauma and has episodes of dissociation. And it's the first time I've ever seen that portrayed in anything. And I've been around people experiencing it, so it's very kind of like, oh right, wow. For me, it was really helpful for me to help understand those people and support them better. Does anybody else have any good recommendations that also?
I think Shameless.
Okay.
Yeah.
The UK or US version? US version. Someone at the back. Yell at us.
Root and Shaw from Personal
Oh.
I need to watch more TV.
I have not watched Person of Interest. Anybody here watched Person of Interest?
I watched one episode when I auditioned for it. That's it.
Never again. Okay, so this is the fun bit. Bad representation.
Oh.
Who do you wanna slag off?
You like leaned at, you were like, well, to begin.
Yeah, this is who.
I think that like there's a reason why a lot of us pick stuff to do with TV shows, in that can often be more developed and have more writers in the writers' room who are contributing to making something that makes sense and has truth to it. I think a lot of film, even like queer indie film, goes very much down the like slightly torture porn element of queer stories, and so you sort of have mental health, but it's not necessarily portrayed in a realistic or sensitive or like nuanced way. It's much more of a how can we make a very sad thing happen, and doesn't necessarily earn the payoff of it, and that I think intersects a lot with the sort of bury your gaze trope of what is it to be super sad and either be killed or kill yourself, or like what does that look like for queer characters. And I feel like a lot of film does it, but it's not necessarily ones that we would pick out as like good representation, if that makes sense.
Can I bounce off that? I feel like a lot of the time, like Rowan said, not only is there this whole element of creating really upsetting dramatic scenarios for effect, but there's this whole idea that if you have a queer character, the entire source of their angst will be their queerness, right? And it's just so reductive. And there's a really fine line that often gets crossed where it's kind of like, oh yeah, this person is incredibly sad and everything in their life is going wrong and they're super depressed and it's because they're gay. And it's like, well, no, like they just don't have a supportive family, or they don't have any resources at school, or their friends aren't listening to them, or like their job is going wrong. Like all of these issues, like environmental factors that do contribute to like anxiety and depression, not to mention all the other illnesses that exist that we don't talk about. But like, it's just that I think is a really dangerous problem, specifically when it's not made by queer people. It's like when you have a straight person being like, this is how I think a queer person would react if they were, because why wouldn't you be depressed if you were queer? And it's like, bro, no, come on.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm a sad queer, but there are like...
Yeah, but like, and I'm like, yeah, I think most queer people I know have had experience of mental health. That feels quite common, but I think also that's not because of the queerness, that's because of the world. It's capitalism's fault, people. Burn it all down. No. Don't arrest me, anybody. Okay, so what kind of tropes do you think are the worst? What's kind of your least favourite thing that you see in representation of mental health? Do you think, have you got a...
I could start with a couple things. Well, one of the worst things, and I've seen this come up a couple times in queer representation specifically, and what's coming to mind is like something real old, because guys, I'm older than some of you. Is Lost and Delirious, if anybody has seen that. That, and even like it's a weird turn of events with like Marina on the L Word. Like, you're like, oh my God, she gets her heart broken, and then she tries to kill herself, and you're like, whoa, that it is so reductive. It does not go at all into any root causes. It makes it seem like, yeah, just like drama for drama's sake. And that, to me, is so incredibly irresponsible. So that's one of the things. And then the other, and this is not queer, and I'm going to preface this by saying that I haven't seen this, and there's a reason I haven't seen it, and I don't normally criticize things I haven't seen, but 13 Reasons Why. The reason I did not watch that was because for me personally, that would be way too triggering. It just would have been like torture. I'm not sure why I would ever put myself through that, but I also read an enormous amount about it. And to me, you know, the people around someone who commits suicide are called survivors of suicide. That's like the term, right? And to make an entire storyline, entire show that focuses on blaming survivors of suicide is awful to me. I can't think, like, the people around somebody who kills themselves usually blame themselves every single day. And the idea of making a story that focuses on why it's all of their fault, I know the show goes into more than that, but that to me is unbelievably irresponsible and out of touch with reality. So
I think a super damaging one that does intersect with queer stuff is the it's a psycho killer, it's the escaped mental patient. Be scared of them because they're not needing help or anything, they're just coming to kill you and your girlfriend that you just lost your virginity to, because that's how those stories go. And I think that really intersects with the like psychotic lesbian trope. Very much these are in quotes rather than me saying this, which is sort of the opposite of the you've had your heart broken, you kill yourself thing. Is you have your heart broken, you want to kill other people, and it really and I think it's really linked to this myth idea of like the one innocent woman in a queer relationship and the one predatory, older, probably more masculine woman who is preying on the other one, and if and it kind of like goes all the way back to like what of loneliness like tropes, like it's such a long-standing tradition. And so you have that if one of them dies, the other one is super sad and depressed. If the other one dies, they turn insane, and with no reality, no nuance, and it happens so often that it just becomes part of the narrative of what like queer relationships are and what the power dynamics are. And I think it has much more wider reaching implications than just mental health portrayal for me.
Yeah, as you're talking, I keep thinking of other examples. So Willow in Buffy, I think.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Antoinette wants to say something.
It's literally just like that whole addiction storyline. It was just, I remember watching it being like 16 and being like, this doesn't make any sense. And then I watched it again and I was just like, wow, okay. I was not prepared. And yeah, I don't know if I can comment on whether or not that was done responsibly. But I do feel like there was sort of, you know what, I can't even comment anymore because Joss Whedon's he's an idiot now, isn't he? Right. Let's just leave that. Let's leave Buffy intact.
I mean, although I will say I think season 6 of Buffy and Buffy's experience in Buffy is probably one of the most accurate representations of depression that I've ever seen. I think I once was depressed and I actually said to my friend, I feel like I'm just going through the motions, and she looked at me and went, you know you're quoting What's More With Feeling right now. And I was like, I'm sorry. American Horror Story. which I think asylum, where people, so women who are queer would get put into institutions, and that's a story that's told, and often is told like, wasn't that terrible? But what isn't also told is terrible is actually all the people who had mental health problems being sent to institutions. That was also terrible. It was also terrible they were there, and it's kind of that like, even though we're kind of framing as it was bad to do that to gay people, we're not framing that that's still bad to do to any person, is to shut them away. That was just a thought I had. I don't know. I didn't really have a point.
It's okay,
Mandahla hasn't spoken in a while. Say something.
Sometimes I just like to listen and observe. I mean, I agree with what everyone's saying, so I don't really have anything to add, except the fact that humans have been around for however many thousands of years, and it's only recently that we're actually speaking up about mental health and actually talking about it and acknowledging that it is a part of many of us, if not all of us, really. So I think the fact that we are talking about it now and writing content is the key and what we need to be doing for people out there who write things.
So this is probably more for Rowan and Antoinette, who do kind of more non-fiction content. Do you feel like that there is more representation coming, like since you started creating what you were doing? Do you feel like that community's growing?
Do you want to take this one?
Kind of, but I'm wary of the fact that you kind of, so historically you've gone from vague, sort of openly nudge nudge wink wink style pre-Hays Code representation, and then you had the Hays Code, which was Hollywood imposed restrictions on itself, moral restrictions, because they were worried the government was going to censor film completely, and that included like a whole ton of stuff. Basically, like no one could do crime and be seen as a good person, and one of the big things was about not being able to portray homosexuality, and then eventually if you could, it had to be like, they had to be the most awful, miserable, like it had to be seen as a punishable thing, and then that sort of all of that led to queer coding, which was, here's a character, we can't say they're gay, but like, you all know they're gay, right? Like, and that's continued in a way that we don't, I think, often realise. So Disney villains, for example, are very queer-coded, and you wouldn't really be able to pick up on it unless you concentrate. And then you're like, yeah, why do they all have these stereotypes that we are meant to consider to be gay? Like, how does that work? And then it goes into, like, queer baiting, and I feel like we're at the other side of queer baiting, which is, like, they see it as profitable to talk about it in the press tour, to be like, hey, so I made a film and they're definitely gay, and you're like, okay, cool, I guess oh no, they're not. That was a blink and you'll miss it moment that like anyone who hadn't heard this interview would not pick up on. And so I think that it feels like there's an increased representation, but it's not necessarily bearing out across the medium, especially because a lot of it's coming in from more like family or children's media, and there's no way that kids are picking up on it whatsoever. And we've just had like the announcement of Disney's first gay character played by Jack Whitehall, because of course, and the only information we have is that he's like really funny and really camp, and you're like, oh wow, that's going to be the first Disney movie with a gay character is going to be played by a straight man who's kind of, his career is based on like how funny it is that his dad thinks he's gay. And I'm like, this is like, I feel like there's going to be more representation, but I don't necessarily think that the people who are allowed to make those decisions have done enough work to understand what that representation should look like.
And in terms of what you do on YouTube, do you feel like that is redressing the balance? Do you feel like that there is or obviously there's been all the stuff with YouTube in the last year where that's kind of made it harder?
Okay, first of all, anyone that's not aware, YouTube is a trash fire. Second of all, balancing off Rowan's point for 2 seconds, yeah, the whole like representation thing, it's like, this is representation and this is what we believe is adequate, and it's like, buddy, you're bad at your job, go do more, hire an actual queer actor, you know, like it's not that hard. Or they just go to the J.K. Rowling School of Retroactive Representation, but we're not talking about that.
I was just about to bring that up.
But yeah, essentially, like, with YouTube, I feel like, because, like, historically, like, the way that YouTube sort of existed was, it was, like, very much a community space for the first maybe, like, 5 or 6 years of its, like, existence. And then, as it sort of grew and grew into a business tool, there's a lot more pressure on people like and creators to basically market yourself in a specific way so that you play into how the algorithm works and you get more views and you get more engagement, right? And I feel like when it comes to mental health, like basically YouTube had this thing called Adpocalypse where they censored a butt ton of content. Like you all are probably aware, like loads of LGBT content still suffers from this. People talking about sexual assault, people talking about mental illness, like anything that's not kid friendly is censored, and you're not allowed to earn money from it, which is like economic discrimination against LGBT people, let's be real. But when it comes to being visible, it's sort of, I feel like right now, like unless you're someone like Rowan who's like incredibly confident and strong in what she does, it creates a lot of pressure for you to conform to this perfect model of appearing happy and appearing marketable and consumable, right? So if you want to talk about mental illness, not only is there this whole thing like, do I do it as an educator like Casey Morton? Do I do it responsibly? Do I interview someone who's qualified to talk about it? Because if you're chronicling your own life experience, like how can you be honest when if you're going through stuff that's painful or difficult, like people just aren't going to see it. Like you're not going to be able to, you know, have an online presence that measures up to that of anybody else if you can't be honest about your mental health. And even then, how honest can you be? Because there's an ethical line there, buddy. Like the internet is not your therapist. So it's creating a very difficult dynamic, basically. So if you do want to talk about mental health, I'd be like, maybe get some help for yourself first and then address it to the internet, because, you know, as creators, we do have a responsibility. As people that are visible to the public, we have a responsibility, and we just have to, you know, be a positive, I know that sounds like, I hate myself for saying that, but like, at least try not to contribute to like the massive negativity surrounding the way that mental health is dealt with on the internet, because it is just like, we all seen how Ariana Grande is being treated on Instagram, right? Like, she was hospitalized for anxiety. Like, internet's a scary place. Keep each other safe. Get some help, guys.
We're done. That's it. Mic drop.
Yeah.
I could sense I was rambling, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's great. It's a good ramble. I'm thinking again, like, I think probably the positive representations I can think of in the media would be probably more YouTubers. Gabby Dunn, I think.
Yeah.
And Anna Akana, who's just come out as queer. I'm very happy.
Hey, Anna.
I love her. She has so many cats. But also...
How did we not know before?
yeah.
How is this news?
But I think she talks very, very honestly about being a survivor of suicide. Do you want some with them? Yeah. I've just been hogging it. And I feel like there's not as many of that in our stories. And you create your own work as well, don't you? So is that something you're trying to put into your work?
Yeah, so I create in a couple different mediums. Shortly after my sister passed away, I started a YouTube channel, and not so much to like be a YouTuber, because that's never been really like a dream of mine, and there are others who should take that and run with it. But since acting is always at the forefront for me, YouTube became this way of basically having somewhere I could do whatever I wanted with all the things that I was feeling. And the more that I started to put things out there and just say, like, literally make a video being like, I wish that I had more videos of my sister, and guys, go out there and make sure that you're taking, you know, doing footage of like where you are at certain times, and because like, God forbid something happens, your family's going to want it, which is a morbid thing. But also, like, in sharing that video, that got like a ton of views, and people contacting me, and it started this whole, it opened basically this whole box of being able to talk about my experience and being okay with, you know, crying as me and not as a character. And I've made a bunch of videos. I haven't made any recently, but I've made a bunch of videos on this topic, on just LGBTQ rights, on women's issues, on a ton of things, but mental health is kind of the thing that binds all of it. And I I just find it's a really good medium to be able to reach people directly. So that's been awesome. And then I also have a podcast that's all about coming out stories, and a lot of people deal obviously with some mental health stuff going through all of that, especially with various family situations. So I'm finding that that's a really great way for not only our audience to hear like, oh, okay, I'm not the only one who's going through this, but also we've had people in the recording booth with us who have said afterwards, like, I'm so glad I did that. That released something in me. So the content that I'm trying to create is basically by sharing your story, whatever that is, you're allowing other people to share theirs, to giving permission for others to feel whatever they're feeling. And I think that's at the root of however we're going to try to help mental health. So.
Yeah. Mandahla, I don't know whether do you write and create, or are you just mainly acting? I don't know whether.
I do. I mean, I do more acting than anything. I used to write a lot, and it's interesting when I look back on, like, when my mum died, it was all poems. So I would write a fuck ton of poems. I'm like, do I swear? Yeah, I'm just going to do that. And then when my brother died, it was just like segments of stories and things like that. So I am putting together like. I guess an autobiography, like my whole story, because it isn't just the death of my brother and the death of my mum, but it also is a past of rape, and my stepfather was incredibly abusive, and I am a foster kid. Was a foster kid. I went into foster care when I was 6 years old. So I don't do any other content except just my acting stuff. But what I want to do is, and I guess what I do is, I'm just open about where I come from and why I'm here and what I do, and I'm not quiet about my mental health.
Everyone doing okay? I just want to check in because I know we're getting into some kind of intense stuff.
I'm just up on a panel and I'm all shaky.
Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to check. Everybody, anyone need to take time out? That's fine. I won't yell at you like a comedy show for leaving the room. I'm like, how can we make this light and fun?
I mean, but mental health is not. It's not light and fun. Oh God. But we can talk about it with a lightness and like a love and a protection with each other. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's not light stuff, but we're together and we all are here talking about it. So that's kind of light in a way. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah.
And I think it does bring people together. Totally. I mean, look at this room is nearly full, so like I feel like that's like, and I joke with my friends about it a lot, like, because we all have experiences of it, and I think there is a camaraderie in that. And I think that's never really shown in media about mental health, is we don't see the kind of dark humour as much that I think exists. Yeah. When you're just like, haha, trauma to your best friend because you both had like the same trigger thing happen.
For example, I had a massive trigger happen when A Star Is Born. Like, when that happened, and I didn't expect, and for the people who haven't seen it, there's a big trigger that happens and I was not expecting it, and I went and saw it, and I knew what was going to happen, and I was like, oh, holy shit, like, I was not at all prepared, and I went out of that, and I just remember, like, I just plummeted. And of course, coming up, like, my brother's 10-year death anniversary was on the 26th of this month. Hang on, where are we? November. Of October. And I'm sure everyone feels that, like, that month, the month leading up to that, you know, like muscle memory, you feel that. So triggers happen all the time. And I guess the thing to say is it's okay. If you're triggered by something, or if you feel dark or whatever, it's okay. And if your friends are your friends, you can actually talk to them and let them know, hey, I've just been triggered. Can you just hold my hand, or can you just be there? Don't ask me why or whatever, but just know that I've been triggered and I'm not actually feeling that great.
Before I forget, you know who handles mental illness with such amazing humor is Maria Bamford. If anybody, you guys should absolutely look up her stand-up. First of all, she's a wackadoo in the best way. Like, she's totally out of her mind. But like, an absolute comic genius. Her show is Lady Dynamite, which also deals with some of this. But I would watch some of her her stand-ups because she's tried to kill herself, I think, multiple times. But she just got on medication a couple of years ago that finally worked after like years of many. She had like bipolar 2, and it's just really intense. That goes beyond, so someone's pointing down here, beyond anxiety and depression. Just some really serious stuff. But she has a way of making, I don't want to say making light of it, but like turning it into comedy so that it's at once extraordinarily vulnerable and also like laugh out loud hilarious. So if ever you want some of that mental health comedy, Maria Bamford.
Hannah Gadsby, Nanette.
I was going to say Nanette, yeah.
Which should have come with content warnings. But yeah, I think, and Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which has queer representation in it, but but I feel like that, and BoJack Horseman, I recently watched and was like, this is very, very real. I know there is an asexual character in it, so it does have some queer rep. I love Todd. But do you kind of, I'm like, how do we fix it? How do we make queer representation of mental health better? Go.
Can I just ask, hands up real quick, how many of, I'm guessing all of you in this room have had experiences with mental health, right? Either like from a primary perspective or a secondary perspective, yeah? Just as we're sort of like creating stuff through to sort of process and deal with what we've been through and how we felt, you guys have the power to do that yourselves. You know that, right? Like you can write, you can film, you can do art, you can make a podcast, you can write a book. Like you can do anything you need to do as long as it's all like not harming anybody. You can do anything you need to and make whatever you need to process whatever you're going through. Because I feel like, going back to what Rowan was saying about the Hays Code and how there was a real restriction on allowing the perception of something to be seen as positive. Like mental health, like I feel like we by sort of taking it and making it into something that you can appreciate, like comedy or art, or like if anyone's heard of kintsugi, that Japanese art form where they make cracked pots and fill them with gold. There's a video on that on Wisecrack Philosophy. Please watch it, it's great. But basically, if you can take something incredibly negative and make something that's even remotely less crappy out of it, I encourage you to take that opportunity, because it will add at least one more nugget of a lack of judgment and a lack of stigma that has been conditioned around mental health, and every one of us can contribute to that. So I just encourage everybody to make whatever you can out of it, and just contribute to the pool of like mental health crap that we're all sort of dealing with, because like you said, we're all here, we're all, you know, talking about it, load of side quiz, it's a fun time. But yeah, just also thanks for like everybody for being here, and like just for having us all here, and just like creating this environment to talk about it.
Yeah, I think
without judgment.
Yeah, I think it's really great. This is one of two panels that are on mental health. So there's one tomorrow, which is being run by psychologists, on how mental health, how representation impacts on mental health of queer women. And one of them wrote her thesis on it, and she sent it to me last night. I'm going to read it because I'm a nerd. But I really recommend that. That's on tomorrow afternoon, I think. So if that's kind of that's the other side of it. I kind of wanted to focus here on how we can do the sort of from an artist's perspective and an audience perspective, how we can make the portrayal better, and they're looking at it more from the kind of psychological side. So
I think that there's this myth of like the tortured artist, right? Of like depression and anxiety and psychosis and stuff like makes you be an artist, or it like makes your art better, which is just not how that works.
You can say bullshit.
That's some bullshit. It's not that people who have mental illness can't make art, but it isn't the art that makes them good art. Like, isn't that makes them good artists. It's not that makes the art. So I think that what I want to, in the same way that I want to see queer people and like being at the forefront of queer rep, I feel like people who have mental health conditions being at the forefront of doing that is important. And you're only going to get that if you give the funding to mental health like foundations and the NHS and like all these things to get people to a place where they can do that. And so I think that it's kind of that to me that's like the root thing of like, unless you start to have the conditions in which people can flourish and you invest in that, it kind of doesn't matter how much you're investing in the art if there's no one there to make it.
Well, damn.
Yeah, and I think this is me coming from a British perspective in terms of the benefit system, and that really, really crushing a lot of people. My last bad mental health thing was because the government decided I did not need any disability benefits because I moved my leg in my assessment, and that means I can walk 50 metres.
What?
Yeah, and I got a page and a half essay telling about how I was a liar and making everything up, essentially. So I think kind of for me, art and activism go together, and stories are really powerful, a way to change people's minds. I think in a way, like I think there's places for all types of protests, but for me, I feel like my activism matters in telling those stories. And I think if everybody tells their stories and we say, hey, it's not just you, because I think just hearing one other person going, hey, I experienced that, is like can change everything. And I think we need to get more people who have those experiences in those places of power. I don't know how would you.
I think two things to address here, because getting into system, because I don't know if you guys have heard, but America's dealing with some system issues right now. So lots of thoughts on that. But going back a little bit to just creating content across different mediums, I have to say, like, being a writer and having created my own blog about my sister, creating the YouTube channel, having the podcast now, I have to tell you, I've connected with people across all of those mediums because I've been using all of those mediums. And luckily, I already had a wonderful queer community following, so many of the people who have come and said, I deal with mental health too, are also within the queer community, so we can talk about that. But I have to tell you, it's brought me enormous solace to connect with people who have similar experiences to me, because I felt like I was so alone in so much of what I was going through. So the more you can make use of those meetings, you don't have to, be able to write a pilot of a TV show. You could just go on Tumblr and be like, this is how I'm feeling. And someone will find that and be like, oh, thank God, this is exactly what I needed to read at this moment, or this is the video I needed to see. I feel this way too. So there's that. And then the other thing in terms of like the actual, how do we make the world better from like a systematic standpoint? I can't tell you how many times I hear from my friends and from people online that I can't go see a therapist because I don't have the money. And in America, almost no health plans, unless you have the absolute most expensive ones, cover mental health. And what's insane about that, and what I think is part of at the root of this conversation, is like we need to stop thinking about mental health as separated from physical health. Your brain is in your body. So if your brain is sick, your body is sick. And the more that we can push that message, and specifically push that message to the top, to the people who are making policy, the better off I think we will all be. The more funding that's going to happen, the more support that's going to happen, the more education that's going to happen. Because that drives me completely insane. And I volunteer at the LGBT Center in Los Angeles, and we have our medical center that is next door. They have 6 to 8 week waiting periods to see a therapist, because there are so many people who want to see a therapist, and they just don't have the resources to do it. And if you have somebody who's in dire need, you can't tell them to wait 6 to 8 weeks. But because that's free counseling, they have to. They have no other choice. So something needs to change. And I think if we can all just say, hey, mental health is physical health, mental health is physical health, that will start to help.
Does anybody else want to comment on systemic stuff, or should we open up? Does anybody have any questions from the audience for anybody on this?
Could I talk about systemic stuff for like
We
2
can
seconds?
talk more about systemic stuff, yeah.
Okay, so basically, tell you what, if any of you, first of all, any of you know Ellen Jones?
No.
Yeah, if you follow Ellen Jones on Instagram, just follow Ellen Jones on Instagram because she's a brilliant mental health advocate.
She was actually meant to be at ClexaCon and she couldn't because MTV has flown her out to Spain because she's been nominated for an award about her activism around like mental health and LGBT stuff. Ellen Jones, she is.
Also, she just met Joey Essex. Anyway, point being that Ellen does really, really great commentary on sort of the systemic handling of mental health resources in the UK. Like, we had a chat and she talked to me about how a lot of the funding that goes toward mental health resources that allows people to process their issues and create art about it and stuff, a lot of that funding isn't ring-fenced, so it's not protected by local councils. And if a local council is underfunded, then they're going to use that money for something else. They're going to use it to clean the streets or something. So a lot of what we're seeing in terms of like the new budget that's been released in the UK, they're saying, oh, we're going to have a suicide crisis center. I'm like, bro, like mental health people, we are not crisis. If you are at the point of crisis, then you're doing something wrong. And I feel like it's this whole mentality of stick a band-aid on the solution, don't tackle the root cause. And if you want to see, you know, more mental health support centers, then you unfortunately may have to become an activist. Fortunately, you will become an activist. You know, you've got to rally, you've got to lobby, you've got to campaign, you've got to go to your local representatives, and if there is no space for you, then make it. If you can't, then fair enough, because not all of us have the resources to do that. But honestly, people banding together and creating the solutions for the problems that they face that are misunderstood and ignored is probably the best way to start a real systematic change, like through a grassroots initiative, because if the people at the top don't know what's going on at the bottom, it's not going to work.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I can't say anything that's going to top that.
Let's take questions now.
The only thing that I would say about that is, and I'm not at all, if you're in a crisis, you're not wrong. You just need help. And you need to be able to actually go out there and ask for help.
Yeah,
so you're not wrong if you're in a crisis. Just know that there's people out there that you can ask for help.
Yeah, I'd really like to amend my previous point. That came out completely...
No, that's fine. I just thought in case, because things stick in people's heads. I'm like, you're not wrong, just letting you know.
No, completely amend that one.
I think it was like the wrong was referring to the system rather than the person.
Completely.
Yeah, I was addressing the system.
I know. Which is why I'm like, I'm not at all. I just need to say this.
Thank you for saying that.
Everyone's so polite.
So I went to America with the US Embassy on a trip a couple of months ago to talk about like some of the biggest issues facing America, and one of the
Where to start?
So it was kind of like a bit of an intense one because we, I mean, for various reasons, they were like we've nailed it down to 3, and we're like okay, but everything just kept going, like everything just kept like winding together. And we had an interview with a few different Republican organizations, and it was just really interesting how even when there were people in there who had like particular issues or projects that they were interested in, so we talked to the log cabin Republicans who are like the LGBT Republican, that's a thing, organization. We talked to people and they would individually, they'd be like, oh yeah, mental health is important or LGBT equality is important, but when you said to them, okay, well, do you understand how that intersects with other issues? Do you understand how you can't not take homelessness seriously, not take mental health seriously, not take drug dependency seriously if you're then saying you're for LGBT equality? Like how can you say that? And I think that it's understanding that these things are so interlinked that like physical health and mental health, but also like what does that look like in terms of income, what does that look like in terms of like a disability or other experiences. And I think that unless you start to look at how would the impact of an LGBT community centre, which London doesn't have right now, what would that look like in terms of being able to combat elements of mental health in a way that is supplementary to medical help? Like what can that do for a community? And I think that unless that's looked at as well, you're right, it's such a, we get to the end of the line and then we're like, oh god, I guess we've got to help these people, and it's how do we help like the spectrum of people, what does that look like?
It's this whole idea that you're worthy of investment, like every single person,
Every human being is worthy of investment. If you're not feeling okay, you're worthy of help, and there are people who will listen to you, there are people that love you. And I feel like a lot of our governments sort of don't want to, spend the money on making community centres and free therapy. Like, our governments don't want to spend that, but...
Well, they also get a huge kickback from the pharmaceutical companies. So that's the other part of it, is they say, well, at least in America. At least in America, it's like, oh, we have an opioid crisis. I wonder what the root cause of that is. Could it be economic inequality and mental health, perhaps? You know, like...
No, addiction is wrong.
No, but we should definitely,
They're bad
definitely
people.
keep taking a lot of money from the pharmaceutical companies. Anyway, sorry, whole other topic. Yeah,
Sorry.
But to the community center point that you guys made, I have to say that, so like my role at the LGBT centers, I am a volunteer facilitator of social groups there, and basically it's, you know, it's not therapy, it's not the same thing, it's not supposed to be in place of that, but I have to say that it is enormously helpful for everybody in those rooms to be able to come together and sit face to face, not just on the internet, and just talk through the issues that are facing us that day. And mental health comes up a lot. And you know, I've said, as I've like posted about that and stuff, I've had a lot of people in different parts of the world say, "Oh, I wish I had an LGBT center in my area." And I agree that we definitely need more funding for that. That said, you also can start groups. I mean, you know, you can go through Meetup and just literally start local groups yourselves, so that, you know, we kind of all step back from our computers and get face to face and start talking about stuff. There's something extremely cathartic and powerful in that, in face to face interaction and community building. So just know that no matter what, like, you have the power, no matter where you are, to start that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that, and if you come back to kind of looking at the stories that are being told, and even that this convention exists. If it doesn't exist, you can make it. And I think often you feel like you're too small or you're not important enough, you don't know enough people. But I think whether it comes to making art or making activism or finding community, like everybody can, everybody is. And I think that having that purpose, I think, is a real help for me. It helps my mental health if I have a thing that I'm trying to do.
This is such a very small point, but if you're, I'm aware of the fact that there's a big barrier to the meetup situation, which is money, which is like you meet up, but you've got to go to a cafe and buy a coffee to do that. If you're interested in that, check out places like the South Bank Centre, which are some of the only public spaces where you don't have to spend any money to be there and be in like a sheltered environment. The quickest practical note on that.
Like
also,
practical.
Also, if you are like going through an episode and you're not able to like go out and meet up with people, which happens a lot. Like some days I'm like, yeah, I'm not leaving the house today. I can't do this. I know it can sound patronizing to have people say, "Oh, but you can," when everything in your body is being like, "No, but I can't. I can't do it." And that's okay too. It's okay to, you know, not feel able to do something that day. But there is the possibility, there is the potential, and there is the option, if you feel up to it, to potentially put your story out there and use social media. Use Instagram, use Twitter, use YouTube. There are hashtag tools that you can use to find sort of content that is open about mental health and art that documents mental health. And that can make you feel less alone. Also, Instagram is bad for your mental health. Just going to put that out there. But, you know, it is possible, but I understand that it might not always be possible to, you know, engage and be active and create, and that's okay. That's okay too, guys.
So I think we've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to give you one last question, which is, if somebody gave you however much money it takes to make a TV show, say, that was going to have a protagonist that was queer and experienced mental health issues, what would that story be? Or what could that story be? What sort of story would you like to see being told?
I'm writing one right now.
Ooh.
So I don't want to give too much away. I don't want to give too much away. Here's what I'm going to say in a broad way. So what I knew going into developing this was that I wanted a queer character at the center, I wanted a poly character at the center, and I wanted mental health covered. And I wanted there to have some element of spirituality in it. But so basically what I would do if someone was like, here's all the money in the world to make this, Personally, I would have will have a bisexual character at the center because I don't think that we have enough representation there. And
stay tuned for the next panel on that.
Actually, the bisexual community suffers in disproportionate amounts to the rest of the LGBTQ community, with the exception of the trans community. I think it's similar numbers for myriad reasons. So I think that that's really important. I think that there are some really specific issues that come along with being bisexual and dealing with society in the way that our relationship structures are laid out for us and all those things. So that's definitely what I would explore. Yeah.
You? I just think like some of the biggest problems with representation can be solved by having multiple representations, so in one place. So not just being like, here's the one character who has the thing, but being like, here are many characters who have many different variations on this thing and deal with it in very different ways. So yeah, if I was waving the wand, it would be all of the things in one place.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait to see that TV show. Actually,
yeah.
Like I'd love to see a show that actually deals with like polyamory and how that relationship structure is now. I want to watch that. Anyway, can I just be like, I want an autobiography of my life? I'd love to see. If I had the money to make a TV show, well, I kind of want to make a web series, but that's a different thing. I would want to see people represented that don't necessarily fit the tokenistic. Like, oh, this is the queer person of color character, this is the white gay character, this is like, you know what I mean? Like there are certain like very easy boxes to put characters into. And mental health, like everything else, often isn't like easily categorizable. Like you don't just have one mental health problem, it also comes in a pair, or it sort of sets off another thing, and there are some weird other symptoms that you might not understand. So I'd love to just sort of take the take the categories that make it easy for us to tell stories and just mess them all up and be like, right, like the friends in college that you have, or friends at university, and they're all just a little bit weird. I'd love to make a series about that where all of them go through the same thing but deal with it in very different ways because they're all such interesting people.
Can it be called Just a Little Bit Weird?
Oh my god, yes, patented. Copyright 2018.
I actually just finished shooting a series called Biffle, B-I-F-L, and it's about representation and how representation matters. And there are 6 characters in there, and they are all of many sexualities. My character, Sarah, is they, them, their, ace, lesbian. And there is a hell of a lot of representation. So there is actually queer content coming out that says representation matters. So it's already on its way. One of them, one of the stories is on its way.
Brilliant. So that's our time. Do you want to tell people where they can find you and find your work and that sort of thing?
I'm at Nicole Pacent on all the things. Let's see. Oh God, my stuff is all over the place. So I have my podcast is coming out with Lauren and Nicole. It's at Coming Out Pod. I also have a bunch of buttons for everyone with our hashtags and stuff. So you can find me there. My YouTube channel, although again I don't post regularly on it now, but it has a ton of content on this stuff. Is just look up Nicole Pacent. You can find Anyone But Me on Hulu, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of stuff, but there you go.
Oh my God. You can find me on @TwistedRose with a double I, because dark is pretty cool. And that's Instagram. I'm mainly an Instagrammer anyway, but @TwistedRose on most things. Or you can also find my website, mandahlarose.com.
Just search Rowan Ellis. It's me and a guy who's really into bodybuilding, and it's very easy to tell which one's which.
It's a bit different. Sorry, that was really funny. @Antworld with a 0 on everything except YouTube, where it's just youtube.com/c/Antworld.